Welcome to Cracking Cooperstown, where we talk all things Baseball Hall of Fame and Hall of Fame collecting. Join us as we discuss Hall of Fame voting, autographs, cards, baseballs, resume, and trajectory. Debate and discussion as we look to crack the code to Cooperstown. Now here's your hosts, Jake Brewer, Dom Manna.
Welcome back to Cracking Cooperstown. It has been too long. Shout out to our super fans, Lou Rock TV, and Brittany, Dom's girlfriend, for asking for more episodes of Cracking Cooperstown to inspire us to get back on the horse and get some more episodes out there for our two diehard listeners. Dom, how are you, my man?
I'm great. As much as I love and appreciate those two diehards specifically and all the other fans of the show out there, we don't need too much motivation this time of year because this is the most wonderful time of the year for us Hall of Fame aficionados and super fans, because in just a couple weeks here on Sunday, December 7th, we will hopefully, fingers crossed, have new Hall of Famers to celebrate, to move into our Hall of Fame binders and boxes and collections, put HOF next to, change our spreadsheets, all those things that us collectors like to do. As we celebrate and collect the Hall of Fame. And last year, we took on the classic era ballot with Frank, Baseball Hall of Fame autograph, now the Hall of Fame CPA, new channel name. And when we were talking about the contemporary ballot, the obvious kind of follow-up to that was to bring on a legend in this community, Bill, the Hall of Fame collector. Welcome in sideways, Bill. I tried to hand signal there, but Bill, welcome to the program. There we go.
There I am. Uh-oh.
Very, very dramatic entrance by Bill.
Mm-hmm. Special effects.
Hey, y'all. Bill, the Hall of Fame collector here. Thanks for inviting me, guys.
We're glad to have you, Bill. Your Hall of Fame collection is museum quality. Literally, for those of you watching on video, you can see the museum that sits behind Bill. In terms of the YouTube community, Bill has the second best Hall of Fame autograph collection, only to Frank, who has a couple that Bill doesn't have, and Bill actually, I believe, has a couple that Frank doesn't have that he's jealous of. So we're thrilled to have you here on the show to talk all things Hall of Fame and Hall of Fame collecting with us, Bill.
Absolutely pleasure to be here, guys. Love Baseball Hall of Fame, as you can tell. It's one of the reasons why I collect. The best of baseball, of America's pastime, and so happy to be here and chat Hall of Fame.
No, definitely, yeah. Bill. And before we get into this ballot and the changes that have been made to this era committee for 2025 specifically, just to give the listeners at home that aren't familiar with your channel and how you look at the Hall of Fame, like what criteria and thought process do you typically have going into what makes a Hall of Famer to you for someone that's on the outside looking in?
Well, for me, I think it's a combination of a lot of things, right? If you're a fan of the game for quite a long time, and you're talking about players that were playing the game while you were alive, it's pretty simple. You just have this gut feeling, like while they were active, that they were Hall of Famers, right? So there's a component of that where, like I said, when you're playing, they were the best of the best, and you had that feeling that they stood out differently amongst their contemporaries and that they were Hall of Famers. Of course, there's additional parameters as they build their careers, right? Whether they had just outstanding peak years, certain things like that play a role. And for I think you also have to consider longevity, right? Certain players are built differently where they can just be very good for a very long time, and that definitely deserves some consideration. And then you have players that are very, very peak or just have a injury prone or shortened career where they still kind of deserve that notoriety and plaque at Cooperstown, and then of course accolades, right? What you can either do on a personal level with respect to rookies of the year, Cy Youngs, MVPs, or hit clubs, statistical things, or what you can bring to a team, right? World Series wins, whether you're a captain of the team, leadership, all of those things I think play to some degree some role, and everyone will weigh each of those things differently.
I know I'm excited to
Well
see
said,
as
my friend.
I know I'm excited to see as we jump into this here. I think you're going to land somewhere kind of in between me and Dom, and that'll make this exercise interesting.
Let's go for it.
No, definitely. And before we get into the actual candidates on this contemporary era ballot, I want to, for the listeners at home and people that may not keep up with the Hall of Fame as regularly as we do, there was a really big change that happened in 2025. There's two, actually. One that is a little bit different, I'll touch on later. But the big one was that starting in 2025, with this contemporary ballot, all era ballots, so the classic, contemporary, and the contemporary with the managers and executives, if you fail as a candidate of the 8 to get 5 or more votes on this cycle, you will not be considered for the next cycle in 3 years. So let's just say, for example, that Gary Sheffield gets 4 or less votes on this ballot. When it comes around for the class of 2029, Gary Sheffield will not be one of the names considered to make up the 8 names on the contemporary era ballot. If Gary Sheffield comes up in a future cycle and fails to get 5 or more votes again, Gary Sheffield could be cast out until they change the rules again, essentially. Like, he could be cast out forever.
Right.
So that is what that's stake now. They're kind of pushing these era committees to elect people and to really take these jobs and votes seriously. I know there's a lot of electorates over the years that have said, I didn't use my 3 votes. So I think they're trying to incentivize people to take this job seriously, use your 3 votes, and not just who do you think deserves to get in right now, but who do you think's necessary to continue the conversation going forward, because there are some conversations that we'll get to that are very played out, and there are some with some more nuance and some more exciting things to talk about as well. So that's a huge change in it, and I'd love to hear from both of you how you think that will impact the electorate.
Do you want to go first, Bill, or me?
Go for it, Jake.
I do agree with Dom that I think that the board of directors, who, for those of you that may not know, they both put together the ballot as well as they select who is on this committee that will make these decisions. I do believe that the board of electors is trying to coax either election or non-election from this committee that they put together to kind of get things moving. I think the worst thing that can happen for the Hall is that this ballot has no one elected, and then it's the same ballot the next time and nobody's elected, and the same ballot the next time and nobody's elected. Right? That's the last thing that they want, with no fresh names, no fresh conversations, no one elected. That's worst case scenario for the Hall. So I think they're kind of trying to push the envelope a little bit of like, check the box, yes or no. Like, put up or shut up time, like who should be in, who should be considered, who shouldn't be. They're trying to force the committee's hand just a little bit more. And they do have, not to go too far down the committee component route yet, I know we'll get into it as we go, but they do have a lot of influence over that. I mean, they've restructured the rules many, many times. They select who is on the ballot. They also select who is on the committee, which is really key. And I know we'll talk about that throughout. What do you think, Bill?
Yeah. They keep changing these rules, and it's very unlikely that what they have set recently is going to hold forever. It's definitely a new experiment that they have, and yes, it is kind of weird to get the same names on the list every few years. but I think they are trying to force a vote. I think there's a reason why certain names may be on this year's ballot in particular. Is to sort of it's basically a big experiment. And with the notion that someone can get kicked off in theory forever, um, will make somebody think twice about how they strategize and select who they're voting for.
Mhm.
And to kind of wrap a bow on what the two of you said, the Baseball Hall of Fame has publicly just said that they want to elect more living candidates. And what we both agree, Bill, is that these rules will probably change down the road when someone who probably shouldn't have gotten 5 or less votes twice gets it. They'll eventually change the rules to get that player back in consideration. The real big change that this made, making them skip a cycle, is these players are retired for 10, 16 plus years. So they are getting up there in age. So you are playing with, do they get their day on that stage in Cooperstown? And some of the big omissions that could have been on this ballot, I'm a big fan of Dwight Evans. He's 74 years old. If he's a classic era ballot, yeah, he'll get a shot at 70. He'll get a shot at 76. If not, if he's a contemporary era candidate, he's not going to get a shot till 77. God willing, I hope he's around. But this is the kind of stuff we're playing with now, with this more immediacy to the voting and the pressure that they're putting on the guys. Is, do you want to celebrate this player not just for Baseball Hall of Fame's sake, but giving this guy a chance to give that speech in Cooperstown? So I think there's a lot on the line. The Hall of Fame knows it. They want some of these conversations to stop. They want to see more players get elected, and they're trying to push it. The biggest complaint I have with this new rule is I think they should have increased the votes to 4. I think they should have let these voters vote for 4 names if they're going to add this extra lever of having to get 5 votes and the pressure. I think they should have gotten to vote to up to 4 so they can basically play defense to some of these guys not completely falling out of obscurity, because there are going to be some voters that still don't use all 3 votes and mess up all the math.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what's going to go on in that room, whether actually they're going to remain completely quiet with one another and confidential in their votes, or if they're actually going to sit there and strategize themselves within each other, more or less, of at least getting somebody in. You have to remember, too, Baseball Hall of Fame, I mean, it's a business, right? It's privately owned. They want to have, come the end of July, every season, to have someone being enshrined, right? Like you said earlier, Dom, someone preferably alive, right? That can go up there and make a speech, um, and enjoy their time there, and can get all the fans out to the up to Cooperstown. So they want to have somebody, and some years and some other times there, it was pretty easy to have a full cast of new Hall of Fame people just getting it from the writers' ballot. I think looking ahead, just certain years here, it's very dry, and there's a potential where it's you're gonna start you gotta start strategizing. Okay, well, if it's unlikely someone may not get in, or only one person gets in through writers ballot, well, what about this opportunity here? Um, so
And that's why I like the change, and why I do actually like that it stayed at 3 votes. While it could have the negative effect that Dom's talking about, I'm eternally optimistic that I think it will force them to get some of these living guys in each ballot, and force us to get some new living guys on there to give some more of those a chance, like a Dwight Evans or my boy Kenny Lofton, later down the road, where he's still alive and now he gets a shot because space has been cleared on the ballot. So I do like it from that aspect, to hopefully give lots of living candidates that could be worthy a chance within the foreseeable, decade roughly.
right, I would absolutely love to have that fourth vote. Because then if somebody only wants 3 people to be voted, they'll get that 3. I mean, not to say that you can vote for 2 people or one person, but on a lot of these lists, there are people, you can make the case that a lot of these people can be Hall of Famers, and so now if you say, are they a Hall of Famer, yes and no, you have more people on that list than you have votes, and now you have to strategically select who it's going to be and what your peers are going to. You can make the case that someone will all say, oh, that guy will get in later, and nobody votes, and now they're gone forever. And so it's just, I would love that fourth vote, by the way.
When
That's
and all three of us would love to be a fly on the wall when this committee meets and see what goes down and how those conversations happen. Um, I feel like most likely that a lot of things are aired in that room and we just never know. I just find it super unlikely that somebody's going to keep their vote close to the vest the way that committee's constructed. I feel like they debate it and talk about it. I mean, lots of people say that's how Baines got in. Look, I love Baines. I'm pro Baines, but like you look at that committee, you had multiple teammates. You had LaRussa, you had a White Sox executive, like a lot of people tied to him. There were a lot of voices in that room that were probably pro Baines that they didn't keep their vote close to the vest. Could have swayed a couple guys, got him in. So I think that conversation is, I would imagine, pretty open.
right.
Yeah. And every, like we have said in the past, the people in the room is truly what matters, because that electorate decides the fate of all these guys, both from 5+ votes to stay in consideration to getting the 12 votes necessary for election and everything in between. So
Absolutely.
16
everything,
people as opposed to 500.
Right.
which you would think would make them easier to agree and talk to each other and get a consensus, but they don't always all talk. Some of them are, I'm voting for these guys no matter what. Like, it doesn't matter what what's said. And there's a lot of people that go in and they're like, hey, what are we going to do?
I think the fewer the people, the more likely you're going to have a surprise. And so we'll see. We'll see what happens this time.
So
I just,
everything
it
we're
has
about,
everything to do who's in that room, and who's put on this thing, and what you have to choose from. Right, cronyism is real. It's happened in the Hall of Fame before. It's, one can argue that other players got in because of connections, or because the people voting were ex teammates or managers or executives. So that can very well happen here. You have a little bit of old school baseball mentality with some of the guys that, with the steroid stuff, which I'm sure we'll get into, and then you have some of the new mentality, and how dense is that room going to be with one mentality versus the other? It's going to be everything this time around.
that's exactly why I give that disclaimer before we get into these great players, because being on any Hall of Fame ballot is an honor in itself. They're getting recognized for having a great career, considerable for Hall of Fame election. All this stuff could go out the window depending on who's in that room. But this is just our educated guesses and feelings on these 8 names. We're going to go in reverse order from 8 through 1, who we think is least likely to get elected on this cycle, to most elected. I averaged our 3 lists. Bill and Jake have not seen each other's lists. I know the results. So we're going to go through this and we're going to talk about why guys landed where they did and their consideration. And it starts off with Fernando Mania. Fernando Valenzuela, he was actually tied for 7th, but he was dead last on both me and Jake's list. So that was kind of the tiebreaker for me to put him last. And the main reason I think he is the least likely to get elected is that he is the one candidate not living. And like I said before, with this stress of 3 votes and falling off, his case isn't super strong to begin with, in my humble opinion. His impact on the game of baseball and baseball in Los Angeles and the Latin community is certainly worthy of being in the museum part of the Hall of Fame. But his career with 41 point something WAR and about a 500 pitching record is just falls a little bit short for me. His peak was really good for 3 years, and he had a couple solid seasons after that. But Fernando Mania being deceased, I think that's kind of the reason why he's thrown on there as a sign of respect. He had passed away in October of last year. I think this was a nod of respect to Fernando and what he's meant to baseball, the Dodgers being big in baseball the last couple of years. I think this was a way of them respecting him and putting his story back out there to young baseball fans, while also not taking away from the deserving living candidates on this ballot. Jake, what do you think? Why did you also have him last?
I echo everything that Dom said. I mean, I've got his autograph here, a 2014 5-star of Valenzuela. Fernando Mania was a very memorable moment in baseball history, worthy of being talked about and mentioned, but not a true throwaway candidate, but on the ballot compared to a lot of these other names, I think it is. to try and spread the vote a little bit less, as opposed to putting a really strong name here in this 8 slot and keeping them from electing someone. I think it's a unintentional, intentional walk kind of situation.
Agreed. They easily could have put Kurt Schilling on this ballot, who received 7 votes the last time the contemporary era ballot met in 2022. But they decided to go with Valenzuela instead, and I think it was strategic in that matter. Bill, though, had him 5th on his list, and it was the only reason why he was able to tie for 8th here. Bill, why do you think Fernando has a better chance than some other candidates that are living on this list?
I would actually he is the least Hall of Famer of everyone on the list in my opinion. I just think that everyone from 5 down, at least this phase, doesn't really stand a chance to get in. So that's where I had him there. I mean, I could have easily dropped him even further. He's still in that right average position there. So I don't have his autograph. I know Fernando Mania thing was very real. He came onto the scene hot and heavy, right? 81. What was he, like an MVP, Cy Young, All Star? So many shutout games or whatever. But he's to me kind of like a throw in. I know he passed away recently, and so maybe that's why they helped probably selected him again to make it a little easier to vote for the other people as well. But to me, he's like no different than like a Hideo Nomo, some sensation that comes in really hot, wins accolades, and then kind of just fizzles out. Well, not fizzles out, but like doesn't maintain that trajectory. And I think he's in the Mexican Baseball Hall of Fame, and he's got a spot in Cooperstown to have. They have all these different things there for important seasons or important players or certain important things, and Valenzuela is really big for the Latin community, but certainly to me, I'd never considered him Hall of Famer.
Yeah, that's reassuring to hear, because when I saw him at 5th on your list, I was a little surprised.
I was going back and forth. I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? But there's a reason why I just feel like there's a few of those guys in the back end who just have, to me, next to zero shot, at least this round.
Yeah, and I don't think that's necessarily an unfair opinion to have. It'll be interesting to see how the voters consider, especially with that new rule in place in the back of their head. They will obviously, that will be issued to them at the beginning of their sit down. Like, hey, if they do not reach this threshold, you need 12 votes to get in. But if they also do not reach this threshold, they're not going to be considered next time around. So that will be interesting. Fernando, I'm a big Hall guy, and Fernando Valenzuela is the one name on this ballot that I personally would not check the box for, even if he was living. I think that he had a great 3 years. He's a baseball legend, but the back 2/3 of his career was not Hall of Fame to me, but still a name that I think was a nod, and essentially someone like, hey, don't vote for him. Like, this isn't someone to consider this time around. Really have this battle of two things that we're going to get into with this next candidate of, do we go just based off of the accomplishments, or do we go based off of the character? And I think that starts here with Gary Sheffield, who was tied for 7th, but I ended up putting him above Fernando just because of the way we had him ranked overall. Gary Sheffield came in at 6th for me. He came in at 7th for Jake, and he came in at 8th for Bill. Gary Sheffield, over 500 career home runs, an absolute masher, one of the best batting stances ever. And my line with the steroids, which I've repeated on this program before, has always just been, if Bud Selig is in the Hall of Fame, knowing and profiting and saying that he saved baseball because he was allowing steroids to happen, anyone who had any rumors of steroids before baseball outlawed them and started testing and suspending players, I'm not going to hold it against them. So the guys like Manny Ramirez and Alex Rodriguez and Miguel Tejada that have Hall of Fame numbers but have steroid suspensions once it was illegal, them I will ding. Gary Sheffield has been named on some lists but never had a positive suspension for PEDs. So to me, 500 home runs and all the other accolades, he's someone that deserves Hall of Fame consideration. It's just a really strong ballot with guys with bigger numbers than him, that did better on the writer's ballot than him, as well as guys that have no kind of cloud of judgment above them. Jake, we know how you feel about the steroid guys. You reluctantly, now that Ortiz is in, are accepting of the guys that hit your metrics. But Bill, you had Sheffield at 8, and you said that these guys at the bottom don't have a chance this time around. So what about this committee and the way it works do you think that a guy like Sheffield and Bonds and Clemens, who we'll get to shortly, don't have a chance?
I just think that barring some cluster of people that are predetermined, that are young and I guess more of that progressive mentality, big haul type of people, like myself, mind you, I just don't see it happening for any of the PED guys, or suspected PED guys, this round. I think it's going to be a big difference if these guys each get less than 5 votes, and now they're at a do or die vote. A few years down the road, when people start to sit on that and understand that. So again, if my list would be very much different if I was voting, because Gary Sheffield was insane. I mean, the guy was a monster. To me, he was a Hall of Famer. Watching him play as a kid, I mean, almost a lifetime 300 batting average, almost a lifetime 400 on base percentage, 2,700 hits, 500 home runs, RBIs like crazy. He's got 60 WAR. The guy was great, and I think he was really good at not striking out as well. Which now you see these power hitters, there's home run or strikeout. I think I read somewhere, and I wrote it down here. Just that's something that impressed me. In his 22 years, he only had 2 seasons where he struck out over 80 times. So again, maybe later we talk about who we would each vote for, but me putting the PED guys, trying to give them my brain, not thinking it's going to happen at all this time. That's really why I have 6, 7, and 8. Of course, of those 3, Gary's the weakest, so that's why I have him at 8.
Yeah, that's why I have him buried as well. Because I mean, if you just look at the statistics, it's a no-brainer. It's someone that should have gotten in by the writers. You got over 1,600 runs scored. You got over 2,600 hits. You got 509 home runs, over almost 1,700 RBIs. He walked more times than he struck out in his career for someone with that kind of run-driving ability. 292 batting average. 9-time All-Star, all those things, 5 Silver Sluggers, which matters to me. Gary Sheffield, to me, is a victim of circumstance, both on the writer's ballot and now in this committee. His numbers are Hall of Fame worthy, but he was on the writer's ballot, and now on this era committee ballot, he only had 1 year without Bonds and Clemens. So now he's back with them again. And I think that with them only having 3 votes, if they added a 4th vote, I could see some collusion where we get a push for all 3 of these guys that have steroid cloud. But Gary Sheffield, I'm a little worried for him in this instance, just because he doesn't have the kind of the GOAT status that Clemens and Bonds can hold a candle to in certain baseball circles that Sheffield cannot. Jake, I know me and Bill just talked a lot. Do you have anything else to add on Sheffield?
I'm going to save a lot of my thoughts that have to do with the steroid stuff when we get to 2 other guys. But I do think it's a huge difference with him being on this era committee as opposed to a writer's ballot. And I do think that's why Sheffield's going to get kicked to the bottom of this list for a lot of the reasons you guys are talking about.
No, definitely. And like I said, I think it's really a victim of circumstance, but Gary Sheffield, Hall of Famer in terms of numbers, when we get to guys like this as well, who I was shocked that he ended up coming in this low. And Roger Clemens is our number 6 across the board. I had Roger Clemens at number 3 on my list personally. And Jake had him in the 6 hole. Bill had him in the 7 hole, which rounded him out to 6 overall on our list. Roger Clemens, the Baseball Writers Association of America awarded him 7 Cy Young Awards. And they knew that he could have been juicing back then. It was reported back when he was in Toronto in the late 90s that he was on the juice. He was named in multiple reports, but one of the most complete pitching resumes this game has ever seen. I think a lot of people, if they had a Mount Rushmore of starting pitchers, would include Roger Clemens. He has a pretty expensive for an 80s card, 84 Fleer Update rookie, which is the same set as the Kirby Puckett and the Doc Gooden. Roger Clemens, to me, is by far the best pitcher in the contemporary era ballot that has been missed by the writers. And the fact that he's the best pitching candidate on this ballot as well, with him and Fernando being the only ones. I think that the pitching really sticks out compared to where the hitting can get muddled in your opinions on, this guy maybe did this clean versus this guy had some help versus what Roger Clemens was able to do versus Fernando's numbers. They just really make them eye pop even more with the Rocket. Jake, you said you had more to add when we start getting to Clemens and Bonds. What do you got to say with why Roger Clemens fell low on your list?
So I'm showing a 2014 Roger Clemens autograph. It's a rainbow, Bill. That's up your alley as a fellow five-star collector. But what I'll add here on the steroid guys or the steroid accusation guys, whatever you want to label them, is fine. This is where we're talking about likelihood on this podcast, and not just if we would vote for them or not, because as we have said many times before, I would reluctantly vote for Clemens if I had a vote as one of my three. However, in terms of likelihood, this is a theory. This is an opinion. That's what this is all about. I think that the board of directors is going to put together a committee that may show some pro towards a Clemens and a Bonds, but I think they're going to stack it against them. I really believe that. I think that not only are the rule changes that they made self-serving in terms of getting more Hall of Famers on there, I think the Hall, just an opinion, I think the Hall is ready to have this storyline done. It brings headlines. Yes, it brings them attention, but it's probably the one hot button topic that's kind of negative surrounding the Hall of Fame, at least for a contingent of fans. And I just think that they're going to construct a committee. They're trying to create an angle to where they can get Bonds and Clemens off of this ballot and clear it for non-controversial names. That's just what I think they're trying to do, and that's why I've got him at 6. Why he would land in my top 3. I would vote for him if I had a vote. I think that they're going to construct a committee, and we don't know that yet at the time of this recording and release, most likely, what's going to happen. But I think this committee is not going to have a bunch of former Bonds teammates. I don't think it's going to have a bunch of former, Clemens managers, guys that are his buddies. Like Andy Pettit's not walking into this room, okay? I think they're going to stack the deck more in favor of other people. What do you think, Bill?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting. Like I said before, I do think, just to put another comment on Sheffield, I do think, and all the PED users, really, you have to get over the hurdle of Bonds and Clemens first. Any of these other guys that are on that list, the Sosas, the McGuires, even Sheffield, just because he's listed or named in the Mitchell report, right? They have that hump and that obstacle is Bonds and Clemens. And let's face it, Clemens to me is a Hall of Famer. Again, I have him all the way at the very bottom just because I do think that they're gonna force them out this time until you get to that dire last situation, and where they might strategize to get some of these other players in before them, but they might strategize the other way. You don't know who they select to vote, and it could be completely different. That next round, it could be different people that want to get him in. If you look at his Boston career, which most of that is before the steroid era, you look at just his Boston numbers. I mean, the dude could have been a Hall of Famer. I would say that maybe his numbers didn't necessarily inflate under the steroids like Bonds did. It just extended. But either way, to me, he's a Hall of Famer. I just had to put him at the bottom because I don't think they have a chance this time. I just see too many stories and pushes for some of these other guys from the '80s and the '90s. But Bonds and Clemens, they will be Hall of Famers. It's not a matter of if, it's just when, and it's if it's a no this time, and even if it's a no next time, they're just going to change the rules at some point down the road. And look what they did to Pete Rose. Right now, Pete Rose is able to be, I guess, voted on or what have you. So things will change.
If
They
they
will be Hall
push
of
him on a
Famers.
ballot.
Yes.
We'll see what happens with
you
Pete.
You actually beat me to that point, Bill. But I'll expand on it a little bit more here. The reason I have him third on my list, it isn't because I think he is the third best candidate. I truly believe with the way that they have sectioned off this ballot, having this rule now that they have to get 5+ votes to be considered, I think it puts a lot more pressure on the people in this room to take it seriously and vote for the best names, get them in. I also think they could have stacked this ballot. They could have put Kurt Schilling in instead of Fernando Valenzuela. They could have put some living, older, good case guys like Dwight Evans and Lou Whitaker and Keith Hernandez on this ballot. They could have absolutely stacked it out like they did last year with the Classic Era Committee. But they left it open enough where I think you look at these players' resumes, and it does start with Bonds and Clemens. I think the Hall of Fame is also sick of this agenda, which is why I think they want these guys to get in. I think they're like, okay, the writers weren't able to do it. There's that last year push usually when it's the last chance the writers get. They weren't able to get the bump. And then the first time they were on an era committee, they didn't even register the right amount of votes because people were just continuing the outside of baseball conversation. We need to have the home run king. We need to have one of the best starting pitchers in baseball in the Hall of Fame and all these other guys that are part of these things in there. And I think this is the beginning of it. I think this is, like you said, the push up or shut up part of it. And the added fact that recently, this year as well, they added the fact that players, once they are dead on the ineligible list, will be eligible for Hall of Fame baseball. If Pete Rose is going to be appearing, Shoeless Joe Jackson and Black Sox players are going to be appearing on era committee ballots. Guys like Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, who didn't do anything, it'll stop them from being on the BBWA ballot. They need to get into the Hall of Fame before we start having the Pete Rose conversations and all these different things. Like, those guys had the numbers. They didn't do anything that was outlawed by baseball while they were playing. I think this is kind of the time to push them up. And there's only one other candidate that's clean, that performed ahead of them last time, that we all kind of agree is high on the list, that I think has a better chance of getting in than Bonds and Clemens. Because I think you just look at the resumes to these guys that they have up against them, and there's a lot of people in that room that are going to be like, am I really going to be the guy that gets this guy off of the Hall of Fame list forever? Like, am I going to be the guy that doesn't check the box for Barry Bonds? Am I going to check the box for 3 of these guys before I check the box for Barry Bonds or Roger Clemens? So I think this is the big push for these two guys, because they need to get this ball rolling. It is blocking up this contemporary era ballot. We talked about the Kenny Loftons of the world and stuff like that. You need to start stopping the blockage, and it starts with these two. So that's where I'm at with it, and I think we will see, because we're both on opposite sides of this, who ends up being right depending on who's in the room. But that was definitely the biggest point of contention between my list and your guys, is how I think the steroids, with the new rules in place for Rose and the votes, is going to go. Just got something, Jake?
Before I add on, who's fifth?
So fifth is Carlos Delgado. So Carlos Delgado came in at third for Jake, fourth for Bill, and came in at seventh for me. I would vote for Carlos Delgado. I think Carlos Delgado put together a Hall of Fame career. But just as I just said, when you put Carlos Delgado's statistics on a piece of paper next to Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, Carlos Delgado was one and done with the baseball writers. Carlos Delgado was only a 3-time All-Star. I do not think there's going to be 12 people in that room that will check the box for Delgado and not for Bonds and Clemens. And you only get 3 votes. So there's 2 other older, more likable guys with hardware candidates that don't have the steroid cloud that I think have a better chance than Delgado. And then there's the two, obviously, steroid cloud, 7-time MVP and Cy Young guys. So I think Delgado was thrown on here as a nod, like, hey, maybe the baseball writers overlooked this guy, but I don't think he's a serious candidate to get in on this ballot.
Delgado diehard will go first.
Absolutely.
So I've got my Delgado 5-star autograph here. And this is where it's very telling what we think the board of directors agenda will be and how they will put this committee together. Because if Dom's right on how they construct the committee, I would actually agree with him. The difference is that I think that they will construct the committee that is going to be pro-clean, pro-non-allegations, and they're going to put people on this committee that are pro-Delgado as the third guy. Not to give away my other two, it kind of does, but I think that he's going to be the third pro-clean guy. Because regardless of if really more Dom's line of thinking is correct or my line of thinking is more correct and how they're going to put together this committee to then affect the outcome to some degree, it is clear that one way or another that the board of directors wants this ballot to be cleared. They want it to be turned over either with elections or guys dropping off. That's very clear. To tack on to one thing that Bill said also that it kind of struck me as he said it, he was saying, how can you put on or put guys in the hall like a McGuire, like a Sosa, like a Palmeiro, like a Sheffield before you put in a Bonds, because they're all hitters. I'll just say it that way. But Bonds and Clemens are tied at the hip in this scenario, even though hitter, pitcher, whatever. I agree. So I think that if the agenda is what I think it might be, and if the committee's constructed that way, if they push these guys off, that's also kind of eliminating all those guys below their names on the list for the foreseeable future. Because then, like a McGuire and a Sosa, while you may feel that their Hall of Fame candidacy is relevant, they become a throwaway name. If Bonds and Clemens have been pushed off and weren't elected, they're now a throwaway name, and we're really only considering the other guys in reality. Because even pro-steroid guys, look the other way, or, it wasn't illegal at the time, however you want to justify it, there's no way even those guys are going to be like, yep, at 2 of my 3, I'm checking the box for McGuire and Sosa, knowing that Bonds and Clemens are sitting on the sidelines. Like, we're really going to put in Sosa and McGuire first before those? I think not. So this cycle and the next cycle of the contemporary era ballot could be extremely telling for the foreseeable future of the Hall of Fame, pending rule changes. But it could be very telling for probably the next decade or two what happens here. I mean, its ramifications are pretty big.
It's very interesting because I feel like I'm in between you guys in certain ways. Because, like, he is saying, like, okay, this is set up to get Bonds and Clemens in, break the ice, get them in, because you're going to have these ballots come in year after year after year with your McGuires, your Sosas, Palmeiros, and at that point will they be considered because Bonds and Clemens are in. Meanwhile, this character up here in the corner is saying they're basically going to collude to keep them out. So then over the next 20 years, when these names keep dropping left and right, they're immediate throwaways. Like I said, they're going to get in. I just don't think this round. And Delgado in this situation, he's sort of just kind of stuck in the middle because I feel like there's 2 extreme thoughts here, right? There's the pro PED. They did this on purpose. The PEDs, the guys are going to get in and open the floodgates, right? I mean, Selig's a Hall of Famer. You have guys that are suspected of, Ortiz's and your Pudge Rodriguez and your Piazzas, all these guys, they're already in. We can all have those conversations. Or, not getting him in at all, and that opens the floodgates for your old school guys, your Murphys, your Mattingleys, and stuff like that. And poor Delgado's in the middle because he's a power hitter. You know, he was in that era where people kind of used PEDs. Who really took it? Who didn't take it? He's in that little mix. To me, Delgado, during his playing days, he felt like a Hall of Famer to me. Um, this is when I watched baseball the most as a kid. You know, I remember him. He was a major threat every time he stepped up to the plate. Um, you know, his numbers fell just short of that magical 500 home runs.
So close.
But really, really good on base percentage. He's that borderline Hall of Famer to me. I think me being a bigger Hall guy, I would eventually get him in. I don't think he. I don't think he has a chance this ballot. And so
That's what I'm saying.
what,
Eventually get him in. Like you guys had him top half, and I just don't think he's going to stick out enough on this ballot. Like he would be one of the guys that I would expect to not hit the 5 vote threshold and to not be considered for next cycle. Not that I wouldn't vote for him. I think Carlos Delgado is a Hall of Famer. I think his statistics matter. But I truly don't think. I agree with you, Bill. They're going to get in. Like Bonds and Clemens are going to get in. Are they going to be condemned until they pass away? Are they doing this? Jake, is this master plan that they're going to keep pushing them off until they're passed away and then have them come in posthumously and slander them for potentially using steroids that guys that have gotten their day in the sun in Cooperstown have also potentially used in the same era against them that put up worse numbers? I just can't condemn these guys anymore. And I think that the pressure that's going to be on these writers and looking at the statistics and everything that goes around it, like I think that we talked about it too, Bill. There's probably only one guy getting in through the writers this year. So they want to have multiple big draws from this era committee. Who would be a bigger draw than Bonds and Clemens? There's two guys we're going to argue about later that don't have the steroid cloud, but it's going to be, I think, between those four guys that are getting the majority of the consideration here. And I think that the statistics side of it, there's Barry Bonds. I have him here, his 86 Fleer update. He's our number 4, and 7-time MVP. The Baseball Writers agreed. 762 career home runs. He had almost 2,000 RBIs and almost 3,000 hits, but he was the all-time leader in walks, so he didn't get either. Everyone talks about in the modern era, everyone talks about Barry Bonds being the greatest hitter they ever seen, the GOAT. He's in those discussions. He needs to have, when he gets into the Hall of Fame, he needs to have that speech. There needs to be something you can go to in the archives that is Barry Bonds giving his Hall of Fame speech, talking about his dad being in the clubhouse as a kid with Bobby Bonds, his godfather, Willie Mays. Like that, those stories need to be told. Willie Mays, in his documentary, gave Barry Bonds a platform in order to push for that as well while he's living. And while he is younger than some of the other guys we're going to talk about and some of the guys that missed the ballot, like I have him as my number 2. I think there's one guy that finished ahead of them in 2022 that the momentum is pushing for him a little bit more, and he's the safer choice. But Bonds and Clemens, I think, are just too strong of candidates on a not stacked ballot to be as low as you guys had them at 5 and 6 respectively. But we'll move on from the steroid conversation and talk about these 3 guys. I'm interested to see what people in the chat have to say about the 2 sides we're on and the 2 thought, because I feel like we can go on about this all day with how this is going. The top 3 was very, very interesting, in my opinion, because it's not the order that I would vote for them personally, but it makes sense if you're saying that the steroid guys are going to get blackballed yet again. Jeff Kent came in as our number 3. He has a 1992 Fleer update rookie with the Mets. He's the all-time leader in home runs at second base. He was the cleanup hitter behind Barry Bonds and won an MVP in 2000, and has over 1,500 RBIs, almost 2,500 hits, a really great offensive profile. He was a average defender at second base. He gets dinged for his defense, I think, a little bit too much. Jeff Kent, for me, was number 5. For Jake was number 4. And Bill, I'm going to hand the floor over to you. He was your number 1 choice for most likely to get on this ballot. And I don't necessarily disagree with this argument. I just want to hear you make it.
Yeah, so it's funny. I have him number 1. I don't even own a Jeff Kent autograph, surprisingly so. But again, this is not who I would want to vote for. It's merely who I think has the best chance. And if I'm automatically this round removing the steroid guys, right? Um, it was tough for me to figure one, two, three, but I put Kent up top. Just looking at his numbers, they separated themselves from some of the other players. Right, I'm looking at WAR's. His WAR's 55.4.
Mhm.
Mattingly and Murphy's 46 and 42. That's a significant difference. I'm looking at home runs. He's pretty close to Dale Murphy, but nonetheless, as a second baseman, he is number one highest. And of all Hall of Fame second basemen, or actually of all second basemen, I think there's only one other second baseman that has over 300. He was pushing near 400, 25, almost 2,500 hits, 356 OBP, career 290 batting average. So the guy was offensively fantastic. Maybe not the best clubhouse guy, maybe not the best person in defense, but I don't think his defense was actually that terrible. It's just that people
You
are
don't, you don't get
pointing that he
55
was.
more with the defense being that bad.
Yeah. So to me, I think I don't know. I just it was real tough putting one, two, three. This whole ballot thing with the odds and it was one of the hardest lists for me to put together. And it's my brain says Hall of Famer or not, and so it's really hard to strategize with where the world is and where the world sits on things. So but I have him at number one, and that's just why, because his stats and specifically because of the second baseman stats. I mean, you see how catchers, um, you know, the standards for catchers offensively versus first baseman or vastly different, right? Third baseman or what have you. Second base, I mean, he's a totally offensive standout at second base. And these other guys, I don't think they stood out to that degree in their fielding position for their offense.
So this committee that the board of directors puts together is usually made up of baseball executives, either current or former, managers, usually former, uh, and then some players that are already in the hall, often contemporaries of guys that are living. They tend to do that. And then often a mix of maybe a reporter, writer, or two, one of the big dogs, or a baseball historian, like a John Thorne or something, that would be relevant to who's on the ballot. For example, Thorne was put on when there were some Negro League names up for candidacy because he's considered an expert in that field. While I think on paper there's an argument to be made for Jeff Kent to get in the Hall, this is why I put him 4 and not in my top 3. While I think that there's an argument to be made, especially from a position, eligibility, and scarcity standpoint of stud second baseman in the Hall, and where he stands amongst his peers at that position, there's such a well-known reputation for Kent that he wasn't a good clubhouse guy. He wasn't liked. And I don't feel like he's going to get any votes from the contingent of his contemporaries, that were even his teammates. That'd be like, Kent's a jerk. Like, I'm not voting for him, kind of thing. Who's going to be that voice in the room that really goes to bat for Jeff Kent to be one of those 3 names? Resume aside, people's opinion and how they're going to sway and influence this room, I think matters a lot more in this 16 as opposed to a contingent of 500, where you're going to get more people that just look at the numbers. I think it's a lot more likely the way this thing is normally put together. I just don't feel that there's going to be a lot of pro Kent, even though I think there is an argument to be made that he could be a Hall of Famer.
In a contingency of 500-ish, he was in the 40s at his peak on the Baseball Writers Association ballot. If I had 3 votes on this committee, Jeff Kent would be right there for that 3rd spot. I personally think he is more than deserving. I could not understand why he did not do better with the writers. That's the reason I have him 5th as well. Is the jerkitis. We've talked about it with so many different guys. The writers and the teammates and stuff being likable matters on these committees. especially with who's in the room, like who's going to vouch for you. I think if you just look at clean statistics, quote unquote, I know some people do think Jeff Kent took steroids. 2022, when this committee met, obviously without that rule of votes and falling off the ballot, Fred McGriff went a perfect 16 for 16 as the clean guy with the offensive numbers. You can make that argument that Jeff Kent is that guy where it's like enough people agree. I think Jeff Kent is safe from falling below 5 votes. Like, I'd be shocked if Jeff Kent doesn't get somewhere in the 5 to 8 range of support. I think there's going to be enough people that put him on as their second or third choice. But the jerkitis is going to stop him from getting 75%. That's why I have him 5th. But a more than deserving player that I think agreed, Bill, at his position especially, stands out way more than these other guys, and statistically is ahead of the 2 guys we have at the top of our list. I don't think the 2 guys at the top of our list would be any of our choices, but they're the 2 guys that have age on their side, have the likability on their side, and our number 2 choice being Dale Murphy, who was a back-to-back MVP winner. He has a 1977 rookie card. He came up as a catcher. He ended up moving to center field and becoming one of the best players in baseball in the 1980s for Jake's Atlanta Braves, Chop on Luca. And this is someone who, when this group met back in 2022, he ended up getting 6 votes of support. McGriff went 16 for 16. Mattingly went 8. Schilling went 7. Murphy went 6. Bonds, Clemens, Albert Bell, and I forgot who the other guy was, had 4 or less votes. So Murphy had some level of support. He is the oldest person living on this ballot. He's a safe choice for people that want to avoid the steroids like Bill chose to do in this exercise. I personally don't think he's the strongest candidate or even close to on this list. I also do think he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. So if you're going to blackball the steroid guys, check the box on Dale Murphy. I think he deserves to see his day in the sun as well. But even with collusion, we're not going to see a class of 4 or 5 guys. It's going to be 1 to 3, like it usually is. So I'll let Jake, you take this. Braves legend Dale Murphy. You had him number 2 overall. I had him number 4 overall. Bill had him number 3 overall. You were the highest. Dale Murphy, is this the year for him?
This is tough, but the whole reason why I put them 1 and 2 is because of their existing prior support as clean, likable guys. It would be so easy, even more so for Mattingly. That's why I've got him 1, with his involvement with multiple organizations and the Yankee Pinstripes, plus his managerial stint in Miami, him being a part of the Blue Jays run this year. Like, there's multiple teammates, there's multiple organizations, managers, executives that you could put in that room that would go to bat for Don Mattingly. And I think that's almost equally as true for Dale Murphy. He's super likable. He's one of the most lovable guys that's like a borderline Hall of Famer that can be put on a ballot like this. And that's not just Braves fan me saying that, that's just generally true. I mean, there's petitions going around every year to get Dale Murphy in the Hall. I see it everywhere. That being said, I actually wouldn't vote for him. He wouldn't crack my top 3. I think Dale Murphy is like the close of the close to what I think makes a Hall of Famer, but I wouldn't check the box, even on the writers one. Now, will I be upset if Dale Murphy gets in? Absolutely not. I'll be thrilled if he gets in. I love Murphy just like any other Braves fan. I do think, though, if he is going to get in, if I'm right on how this makeup of this committee is going to be done, it's going to be Mattingly and or Murphy. Even though I think Delgado is going to get the 3rd most support, I do. That's why I put him 3rd. I don't think he's going to get enough to get in. I think it's going to be a lot of Mattingly, a lot of Murphy, a little bit, like a vote or 2 more for Delgado, and then everybody else below the mark. That's how I think it's going to shake out. What do you think, Bill, about Murphy / Mattingly, since we now know that they're going to be 2 and 1?
Yeah, so um, Mattingly's ranked higher for me than Murphy, for a couple reasons. But with respect to Murphy, I mean, he is like the definition of all, like right there is your Hall of Famer, is the Hall of very, very, very good, right? Um, because for a number of years he was, you can make a case that he may have been the best baseball player in the game, and he peaked very high. In the 1980s. I believe there are a number of stats that he actually leads in for the 1980s. I don't know them exactly, but I do know he's like a leader of the most whatever in the 1980s. But 2 MVPs, 5 Gold Gloves, 4 Silver Sluggers, 7 All-Stars, um, and 398 home runs. And you know, even though these numbers are all borderline stuff, again, from what they say, his persona, he's very likable, and it's something like that. And the push for getting people into the hall while they're alive could very well be the reason why he gets voted in. Um, I do know a few people that love this guy, and many fan pages are constantly vouching for him to get in. Um, So we'll see how they take it. But that's why I had Dale Murphy. He was a safer vote, just given the circumstances and how I felt things were going to go. At least this ballot.
And Bill, knowing what we know, because we don't know who's on the committee right now. Knowing what we do know that Murphy and Mattingly had enough support on the prior contemporary era ballot to, if these rules would have been in place then, they would have remained on it. And they're the only two that we can say that for, knowing what we know right now.
Right.
No, I think that's completely fair. I didn't have Murphy buried on my list for that very reason. He's going to be 70 years old in March. As the oldest guy on this list, I think that if you're pushing the older living candidates and you're not pushing Bonds and Clemens, he's a very safe choice. The reason why I had Mattingly number one, Jake had Mattingly number one, and Bill had him number two. Consensus are number one. Jake, you kind of stole my thunder, segueing well into Mattingly. I've taught you too well as your producer slash co-host. Is not just the pinstripes, but like you said, they look at the whole baseball career now. They don't just look at your main contribution to the game. And I think a big part of the reason why he agreed to part ways with the Blue Jays is because he has a dang good feeling he's going to be in Cooperstown this summer. And he can enjoy that. Step away from managing and coaching in baseball for a little bit. So Mattingly, to me, is the one guy I was able to put above Bonds and Clemens because he's able to get half of the committee's support last time. He's living. He has the peak. He has the pinstripes. He has the coaching. He has the relationships within baseball. He is the safest choice, regardless if you're a steroid guy or not. I can guarantee you at least one person on this committee is going to vote Mattingly, Bonds, and Clemens. So even if there is a big push for Bonds and Clemens, Mattingly is going to be that third vote for some people, or even that first vote if they value it above. Um, so I think he's going to end up on a lot of ballots. I think that he feels personally that he belongs, and it's going to be really hard, I think, to keep him out. That's the only rookie card of the guys I believe in that I do not have. His 84 Don Russ, a very iconic card. It's hard to find centered. It's expensive for an 80s card, and it's going to get more expensive to get selected to the Hall of Fame. But we disagreed here about how this committee might go. Bill's kind of tossing and turning between me and Jake's arguments. Just this overall thought process. We've talked through the ballot. We've talked through the potential outcomes. If you had 3 votes, who would you be voting for, Jake?
Quickly, Bonds, Clemens, Delgado.
The Delgado support does not die.
Delgado, die hard, baby. Clean.
Bill, you get up to 3 votes. Who are you checking the box?
Without a doubt, Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, and if I had to choose the very next best one on that list, it would be Sheffield.
That's fair.
If I was just going off the best, I would have the same list. I'm gonna flip my third vote from Sheffield to Kent, just because I think Sheffield gets buried on this ballot, and I don't want Kent to fall short of the 5 vote threshold. So I would go Bonds, Clemens, Kent if I had a vote on this committee. But like I said, I vote for 7 of the 8 guys. I think, for all respect to Fernando, I'd vote for the other 7 guys if I could get unlimited votes. But that's not how this committee works. They didn't even give us a 4th vote. I'm still going to petition for that going forward. But I think the real big thing here, regardless of what side of the fence you fall with the steroid cloud and with what the Hall of Fame's thinking with this new rule, is if they feel one way or the other. Why even put Mattingly and Murphy, kind of likable older candidates, on with Bonds and Clemens? Why not make an all steroid ballot where the cream rises to the top and Bonds and Clemens are on there with Palmeiro and McGuire and Sosa? Why not do that? Or why not do something that keeps Bonds and Clemens and Sheffield off and adds 74-year-old Dwight Evans getting a chance to get in, and 68-year-old Wulu Whitaker and 72-year-old Keith Hernandez? Why didn't they go one way or the other? Why did they do this mix?
2 reasons, I think. One, it's too obvious to show their hand of what they're trying to do. It just is. It's, with that, even to the average Hall of Fame fan, outside of us and a handful of other guys that I know that listen to this, who's really thinking through that deep of like, well, they decide who's on the ballot. Well, they decide who's on the committee. Well, who's that usually made up of? Most Hall of Fame fans don't even think about that, right? They don't think there's any opportunity for manipulation there, but there is influence there, I'll say. I won't go as far as to say manipulation, but there's influence there on who they choose. So I think it's too obvious to show their hand on what they really want if they loaded it one way or the other. And then secondly, I think that they want it to appear natural, that they didn't really have that influence, that they want that group to decide and get some of this stuff cleared through the rules that they put in place. And they can say, the committee decided these guys are out. We're putting other names on there. I think that's why they put a mix.
You got to put a mix. I feel like if you put it on only steroid ballot together, depending on who you have in that room, again, they don't have to vote for anybody. So you could very well walk out with 0 people being elected. You have to remember, and I actually have this in the background because I did want to mention it at some point, but in 1945, Baseball Hall of Fame announced what's called a character clause. And this is the whole reason why we're having this conversation. And that character clause states specifically the players should be chosen based on playing ability, sportsmanship, character, and contribution to the teams on which they played and to baseball in general. So when you think of character and sportsmanship, right? How do you weigh that? There are a lot of people, like I said, that will just say because whether it was illegal or not, because they think they took something they shouldn't be in, period, end of story. And, it's a shame that, I do think things will change, but I wouldn't advocate for an entire PED list to choose from, because you could very well walk away with 0 people being elected.
Or they also run the risk of it could work to the antithesis of what they want. Like if they in theory want no steroid guys, and they're like, all right, we're just going to put them all on a ballot, like clear them all, right? It could backfire on what they want and what they intend. So that's another side and angle to it, that why I don't think they would do it.
Yeah, but your argument was what they want was for this dialogue to stop. So, like, point blank, you just load it with alleged steroid guys. Are we going to start this process, or are 16 guys going to blackball this part of the game that has been celebrated in part with BBWA elections, as well as some committee elections? Like, are we going to blackball these guys, or are we going to start, supporting them?
And to tie into Bill's point, it's so risky that even if that's what they want and that does happen, then you have an empty platform potentially. Like, that's even worse for the Hall. they don't want that look. Ever.
Yeah, because even if Bonds and Clemens don't make it this time around, but somebody like a Mattingly or a Murphy or Kent does, they can quickly shift focus and news stories to who got in and just forget about Bonds and Clemens for now. It just like who got in and kick that can down the road right to that next round. But if you had a steroid only vote, that would dominate the news, and I think it would be negative for baseball.
Most people who care about the Hall of Fame, like the three of us obviously do, they often talk about who didn't get in more than who did, or who didn't make the ballot more than who's on the ballot. So I don't know if you stop the dialogue completely unless you don't get a result one way or the other. And like you guys could be right. This could be stacked against Bonds and Clemens with who they put on the committee. They don't get in, and then they don't have to put a Palmeiro or a McGuire or a Sosa on a future ballot. But I think that those two guys would be just as big, if not bigger, draws than Mattingly and Murphy, just in terms of baseball fandom and the teams that they played for. And it'll be very interesting. I think regardless, we're going to see some combination of those names being the ones being elected. As much as I like Carlos Delgado, Jake, as much as I like Jeff Kent, Bill, could one of those guys surprisingly rise to the top? I guess it's always possible that the Harold Baines election being the one people point to the most in terms of surprises, but it's really, really interesting. And before we wrap this up, if there was one name you could add to this ballot, I'm not going to make you to select who gets off. If there's one name you could add to this ballot, who would you add?
I have to say Curt Schilling. He's the most deserving, I think, that's not on here. Aside from him, I'd then say Kenny Lofton because I'm a big Kenny Lofton guy. Speed appreciation. I think he's truly a Hall of Famer. Schilling controversy aside, I think Lofton's one of the bigger snubs, if you will, that's not yet on the ballot. What say you, Bill?
I say Schilling all the way. The dude was a Hall of Famer, and he just did not do well with the media. Did not do well with what he wanted to say and didn't want to say, what have you, and pissed off a lot of riders. Again, this is a whole different thing now. We're not dealing with riders. Riders might have hated Bonds. Riders might have hated Kent, but now we're talking about players and executives and who look at things differently. So it's a different ball game when you start talking these veterans committees or contemporary. The voting pool's different. They're going to look at it differently.
What about you, Dom?
I've talked about Dwight Evans a lot during this podcast. I think he would be eligible, but he's someone that can go either way. And with his age, if they want to consider him a classic era candidate and put him on the next classic ballot, I'm fine with doing that. The change I would make personally is I would take Kent off and I would put Lou Whitaker on, 68 years old, stop signing TTM, super likable, much higher WAR, has teammates in the Hall of Fame. I would put Lou Whitaker on there. But do you see what I'm saying? If Curt Schilling was on instead of Fernando Valenzuela as a candidate, if Lou Whitaker, who's more liked and has the higher sabermetric total, was on instead of Jeff Kent, if guys like Dwight Evans or Keith Hernandez were on instead of Bonds and Clemens, because if Bonds and Clemens do what you guys think and don't register the 5 votes, in 3 years, they won't be candidates anyway. But Lou Whitaker, Keith Hernandez, Dwight Evans, Curt Schilling, they'll all be older. So to me, I think they're giving them a fair fight. I think they're giving them a real shot to get in here and in this field. And I'm very, very fascinated to see this election because it's with this new rule in place and these candidates' careers in jeopardy, or their candidacies. I think this is arguably the most important Hall of Fame election that's happened in some time. And it'll be huge, not just for us who follow and collect it, but just for the institution as a whole in the direction that they move forward. So I don't know if either of you had anything else you wanted to add before we wrap out of here. I know we're over an hour.
No, all I would say is that when they announce the 16 members that are voting, I would say that there stands a chance where any one of us here might change our list entirely, because that has a lot to do with what ultimately will wind up happening on December 7th.
And for us to go on the record here in 30 seconds each or less, okay, we don't know who's on the committee. Like Bill just said, we could change it based on that. Probably all of us would. 30 seconds or less. Who do you think gets in from this ballot? Who do you think registers enough to stay on, and who misses? I'll go first to give you guys a little bit of time to think about it. Okay. So I think that Don Mattingly's going to get in. I can't believe that. I don't think Mattingly's a Hall of Famer, in my opinion. I think he's going to get in if the committee construction goes the way that I think that it's going to. I think that Murphy will get enough support to register to stay on. He'll get the 5+. I think Delgado's going to get 5. I think he's going to get 5. I think everybody else comes in below. That's my prediction on the record. I may change my opinion, like Bill said, when the committee comes out. But knowing what I know at this moment, that's my prediction. Who wants to go next for the record?
Yeah, if you want your Dom Mana way too early parlay, I'm going with Barry Bonds 13 votes as the leader in the clubhouse. I'm going Roger Clemens 12. I think it'll be the two-man class of them. I think Mattingly falls just short at 10 votes. I think Murphy and Kent will be in that 6 to 8 range. And I think Delgado, Sheffield, and Fernando all fall under the 5-vote barrier. That's my initial thought to this. But depending on who's in that room, that could go all out the window and you'd lose a lot of money betting on it.
Yeah. I think it's easy for me to say that Valenzuela is not going to get 5 votes. I do think that Sheffield and Delgado actually do not get the 5-vote threshold. I do think Mattingly and Kent, I think we're going to get 1 or 2. And so it's going to be 1 or both of those. But then I do think Murphy, Bonds, and Clemens do exceed 5 votes. There's going to be a few holdouts in that room that are just going to be, right what Dom's saying. It has to be this. It has to be this, and they're not going to care what Jake says. And so you're going to get the 5. You're going to get the 5 votes easily.
Well,
and that's going to prevent there from being 3 people because it's going to dilute the vote count.
I agree. That's why I only have it being a 2-man class. I don't think they could get more than 2.
Yeah. Well, and true to form for this entire podcast, I'm one end of thinking, Dom's the other end, and Bill falls right in the middle. He made the perfect guest. So thank you for coming on to do this with us, Bill. It is the first time we've had you on Cracking Cooperstown, but I really hope that it won't be the last. So tell everybody where they can find you if for somehow they live under a rock and they're listening to a Hall of Fame podcast. Tell them where they can find you and follow along with what you do.
Well, it's pretty simple. The name is right there. Bill the Hall of Fame Collector. It's my YouTube handle as well as my Instagram name. And I am basically a YouTube, I guess I'm a Hall of Famer, and I collect baseball and basketball Hall of Famers and 90s inserts, specifically of Brave legend Greg Maddux. And so, again, if you like looking at some cool stuff, follow me.
Thanks, Bill. We appreciate you, man. But we're going to wrap up here. Hopefully, we'll have another episode after this one pretty quickly. If you enjoyed listening to Cracking Cooperstown, wherever you listen to your podcast or watching us here on YouTube. But until next time, for myself, for Dom, my co-host, and for our guest, Bill, keep collecting, and God bless.